His family stopped sleeping. What happened inside their home was real. Sleep ended the night the house refused to stay quiet. What began as exhaustion turned into fear, and fear into something that hollowed a family from the inside. If you believe real horror lives where people feel safest, subscribe now and leave a comment before the story continues. Because what happened inside this home was documented, witnessed, and never fully explained. Matthew Holloway had lived most of his adult life believing that routine was protection. He believed that predictable days, a stable job, and a quiet neighborhood could insulate a family from chaos. The house he bought in rural Pennsylvania reinforced that belief. It was a modest two-story structure built in the late 1960s, sitting on a long stretch of land bordered by trees that rarely moved, even in strong wind. There was nothing remarkable about it. That was the appeal. Matthew moved in with his wife, Laura, and their two children, Evan and Claire, after years of renting. The house passed inspection. The neighbors were distant but polite. The nights were silent. For the first year, the family slept deeply. Then the sleep began to thin. It started with restlessness. Matthew noticed that Laura began waking earlier than usual, sitting upright in bed without realizing she had done so. The children complained of exhaustion without being able to explain why. Evan struggled to stay awake at school. Claire developed dark circles beneath her eyes that makeup could not hide. Matthew himself began waking every night at nearly the same time, his heart racing for reasons he could not remember. At first, he blamed stress. As weeks passed, the restlessness sharpened into something more precise. Sleep did not simply fail to come, it was interrupted. Not by dreams, but by the sensation of being watched. The house felt crowded at night, even when every room was empty. Air seemed heavier after midnight, pressing against walls and ceilings as though something unseen had shifted its weight. The family stopped sleeping through the night altogether. Matthew began documenting their schedules, convinced there was a pattern he could identify. Each member of the family woke repeatedly between 2 and 4 in the morning. No alarms. No disturbances that could be explained. Just sudden alertness, as if the body had sensed danger before the mind could process it. The children grew fearful of their bedrooms. Claire refused to sleep alone, eventually moving her blankets into the hallway outside her parents' door. Evan slept with the lights on, claiming that darkness made the house feel larger than it should be. Laura's patience eroded. She grew irritable, withdrawn, her thoughts slow and unfocused. Sleep deprivation hollowed her expressions, turning her gaze distant even in daylight. Matthew remained determined to find a rational explanation. He inspected the house repeatedly. He checked the attic for animals. He inspected the basement for structural issues. He installed carbon monoxide detectors and air quality monitors. Every test came back normal. The house was stable. The air was clean. There were no intrusions. Yet the nights worsened. By the second month, the family averaged less than 3 hours of sleep each night. Their bodies adapted poorly. Headaches became constant. Appetite vanished. Minor illnesses lingered for weeks. Laura began experiencing moments of confusion, forgetting familiar words and misplacing objects in impossible locations. Matthew found keys inside cabinets, shoes in the garage freezer, and once, a child's blanket folded neatly beneath the basement stairs. The basement became a point of fixation. It was unfinished, with concrete floors and exposed beams, used primarily for storage. Matthew had always disliked it, though he had never known why. Now, he avoided it entirely at night. The air felt colder there, heavier, as if pressure accumulated below the house and rose upward after dark. When he stood at the top of the basement stairs at night, his body reacted before his mind did, tightening with an instinctive warning. The family never discussed hearing sounds. They did not need to. What they experienced did not announce itself with noise. It announced itself with presence. Sleep became dangerous. Evan began waking in places he did not remember falling asleep. Once, Matthew found him sitting at the kitchen table at 3 in the morning, eyes open but unfocused, hands resting flat against the surface as if grounding himself. Claire began suffering night terrors without imagery, waking in panic with no dream to describe. Laura's breathing became shallow during sleep, her body tense as though bracing for impact. Matthew realized the house was not allowing them rest. It was interrupting the process itself. He contacted a physician. The diagnosis was stress-induced insomnia affecting the entire household. Treatment was prescribed. Medication dulled their anxiety but did not restore sleep. Instead, it blurred the boundary between waking and resting. The nights grew longer, thicker, filled with moments of lost time. The first physical change in the house appeared shortly after. Hairline cracks formed along the living room ceiling, spreading outward in uneven patterns that did not match the home structure. Doors began drifting open on their own, not slamming, but easing as though guided by subtle pressure differences. The basement door no longer stayed fully closed unless forced. Matthew began sleeping in short shifts, pacing the house at night while the others lay awake. He noticed that the temperature dropped noticeably between 2 and 4 in the morning, regardless of weather. The air carried a faint, metallic smell that vanished by dawn. Electronics malfunctioned during those hours, screens dimming or freezing without explanation. The family's sense of time fractured. Days blurred together. Night became an extended vigil. Matthew caught his reflection in the hallway mirror one morning and barely recognized himself. His face appeared drawn, eyes sunken, posture slumped as if gravity had increased. He realized then that exhaustion was no longer the primary problem. Something else was feeding on it. Neighbors noticed changes as well. The family stopped attending gatherings. The children withdrew. Laura stopped driving after narrowly missing a stop sign she claimed not to have seen. Matthew's work performance declined. The house had become their entire world, and the world inside it was narrowing. The turning point came on a night when none of them attempted to sleep. They remained in the living room, lights on, bodies rigid with anticipation. The house felt wrong, not active, but expectant. Pressure built in the walls, subtle but undeniable. The air vibrated faintly, not audibly, but through bone and muscle. Matthew understood then that sleep deprivation was not a symptom. It was the mechanism. The house was keeping them awake for a reason. As the night progressed, that realization deepened into dread. The basement door shifted slightly, opening just enough to reveal darkness that appeared thicker than the shadows elsewhere in the house. The temperature dropped again. The children huddled close to Laura, who stared forward without blinking. Matthew stood, heart pounding, aware that whatever had altered their sleep was no longer content to remain passive. The family did not sleep at all that night. By morning, they were no longer the same people who had moved into the house believing routine could protect them. Exhaustion had stripped away their defenses, leaving them raw, exposed, and vulnerable to something that understood exactly how to break them. And the house was not finished. By the third night without sleep, the Holloway family's reality began to fracture in ways exhaustion alone could not explain. Their bodies moved, but their minds lagged behind, processing moments seconds too late. The house no longer felt like a structure built to shelter them. It felt like a system operating on its own schedule, indifferent to the damage it caused. Matthew stopped leaving the house altogether. He feared that if he did, something would shift in his absence. The pressure he felt each night seemed responsive, almost attentive. The longer they remained awake, the stronger the sensation grew, as if whatever inhabited the space was calibrating itself to their alertness. When the family attempted to rest during the day, sleep came briefly and without restoration. Their bodies shut down, but their minds remained strained, alert even while unconscious. The house had learned them. Laura's condition deteriorated fastest. Her thoughts slowed to the point where routine tasks became disorienting. She lost track of time, sometimes sitting for hours without realizing it. Her hands trembled constantly. Matthew observed her closely, noting how she seemed most unsettled near the basement, her posture tightening whenever she passed the door. Claire began mimicking the behavior, stopping short of that threshold as if guided by instinct. Evan's sleepwalking returned, more frequent and more disturbing. Matthew found him standing in corners of the house, facing walls, unmoving. The boy's breathing was shallow, his body rigid, as though listening for something beneath the surface of the structure itself. Each episode ended without memory, leaving Evan exhausted and frightened by the blank spaces in his nights. The family sought help again. Medical professionals attributed the symptoms to acute sleep deprivation compounded by environmental stress. They advised temporary relocation. Matthew agreed immediately. He arranged for the family to stay with relatives several miles away, believing distance might break whatever hold the house had on them. The first night away brought relief. They slept. Not deeply, but enough to function. The second night, however, the restlessness returned. By the third, sleep fractured again into brief, unsatisfying intervals. The same waking hours reappeared. The same pressure settled into their bodies after midnight. The house, it seemed, had not released them. Matthew realized the problem was not proximity. It was exposure. They returned home. The decision marked the beginning of the end. Upon re-entering the house, Matthew felt an immediate shift. The air felt denser, heavier than before. The interior appeared unchanged, yet something about the space felt compressed, as if the walls had subtly moved inward. Laura became nauseous within minutes. The children clung to her, visibly unsettled. That night, the house escalated. Sleep was impossible. The pressure intensified, no longer confined to specific hours. It ebbed and surged unpredictably, moving through the structure in waves. Matthew noticed fine debris drifting from ceiling cracks, settling on furniture like dust shaken loose by movement beneath the foundation. The basement door strained against its frame, the latch bowing under unseen force. Structural inspectors were called the following day. They found no immediate cause for concern. The foundation appeared intact. No sinkholes. No gas leaks. No seismic activity. Their instruments detected subtle shifts in air pressure, but nothing beyond acceptable variance. Matthew watched as they left, feeling a sense of isolation deepen. The problem was real, but it did not exist on paper. That night, the house reached its breaking point. The pressure became localized, concentrating near the center of the structure. Matthew felt it beneath his feet, a subtle upward resistance against gravity. The floor vibrated faintly, not with sound, but with movement. Laura collapsed from exhaustion, her body finally surrendering. The children sat rigid, eyes wide, breathing shallow. At approximately the same time the pressure peaked, a section of the basement floor collapsed inward. The depression was shallow but unmistakable. Concrete fractured, revealing compacted soil beneath that appeared unnaturally smooth, as though compressed repeatedly over time. The collapse released a wave of cold air that rushed upward through the house, carrying the same metallic scent Matthew had noticed before. The pressure dissipated almost immediately. The house fell silent. For the first time in weeks, the holloways slept. The rest was deep, dreamless, and unnerving in its suddenness. Matthew awoke the next morning with a sense of dread so profound it eclipsed relief. He knew instinctively that the silence did not signify resolution. It signified completion. Authorities returned. The basement was excavated further. Beneath the collapsed section, they discovered a void extending several feet below the foundation. The soil showed signs of repeated compression, as if weight had been applied and released over an extended period. No remains were found. No tunnels. No explanation for how such a space could form naturally without destabilizing the structure. The house was condemned. The family relocated permanently. Their belongings were retrieved under supervision. The property was sealed. Records listed the cause as structural instability due to soil subsidence. No further investigation followed. Recovery was incomplete. Laura never regained her cognitive clarity. The prolonged deprivation left lasting damage. She struggled with memory loss, anxiety, and chronic fatigue. Evan required ongoing treatment for sleep disorders that persisted years later. Claire developed an acute sensitivity to enclosed spaces, particularly basements and stairwells. Matthew carried the weight differently. He returned alone to the property once, months later, standing beyond the fence erected around the structure. The house sat silent, windows dark, ground uneven beneath it. Vegetation had begun reclaiming the perimeter. From a distance, it looked ordinary again. Vacant. But Matthew knew better. The family's medical records documented the damage. Inspectors logged the anomaly. The timeline was consistent. What remained unexplained was intent. Whatever had occupied that space beneath the house had required the family's exhaustion to complete its cycle. Sleep deprivation had not been collateral damage. It had been the process. The Holloways never spoke publicly about the experience. Their story existed only in records, assessments, and the quiet knowledge shared among those who had witnessed the aftermath. The house remained unoccupied. Locals avoided the property without knowing why. Some structures do not need to be haunted to be dangerous. Some only need time, pressure, and people who sleep inside them long enough. Some stories don't end with answers, only consequences. If this one stayed with you, subscribe for real horror rooted in documented events. Share your thoughts in the comments, because stories like this survive through witnesses.